Thanks, Dee. I'm excited to be here. Today's topic is actually near and dear to my heart. I actually started my career at Anderson Consulting many years ago as a technologist. I was focused on building software for our clients, and over the years, I was able to get into sales primarily through my ability to talk about technology in such a way that people understood it, and then ultimately that led into selling. So today is a topic, like I said, near and dear to my heart. We're going to be talking about technology, we'll be talking about sales. Can't get much better than that. Today is the seventh part in a seven-part series of our enterprise sales predictability model. This is a model that Revenade has developed by working with and talking to hundreds of small, medium, and large-sized companies who are looking for ways to increase their visibility, reliability, and ultimately predictability of their sales. As we've talked about today, we'll focus on the seventh element, tools and technology. And very purposefully, this is the last in our series because we believe that technology and the various tools should be supporting the other six lenses on our wheel. So today we will share those best practices that I talked about, and we're going to do this through various case studies. We'll do this in a little bit different way though than compared to how we have done it with our other sessions. The primary focus today is twofold. One is to help you avoid any types of the common pitfalls that we see our clients making, or we see other case study clients or case study companies rather making when they go out and they pick and implement some form of sales enabling tool or technology. The second thing we'll do is we'll focus on which sales processes we think can be the best enabled processes for you with tools and technology. And ultimately, we're doing all of this, of course, so that you can leverage these tools and technology to be sales multipliers for you. Now, we're using the words tools and technologies, and I want to make sure that we're understanding exactly what we mean by this, because today we're going to use those words a little bit interchangeably, but actually they're different. The first is a tool, and as we all probably learned in grade school, a tool is something that has a very primary purpose or focus and allows us to make a job easier and more effective. The example I'm showing here, of course, being a shovel, but a lot of times people have a tendency to think of the tool as something like a hammer, and unfortunately they start to see the world as nothing but nails, and that is their one and only tool or solution for everything. We think actually that's wrong. The second thing is technology, and a lot of times in today's world especially, we think of technology as software or hardware. We may go to a doctor and they have some sort of a machine there, and those are all in fact technology, but for today's conversation, we should think of technology as anything that really aids us in the practical application of our sales knowledge. So much like this assembly line where today I think it would be almost impossible for any major car manufacturer to make cars without having decades worth of automotive building experience wrapped up into assembly lines. It's very difficult today also for us to sell without some form of technology that is supporting us in what we do. Now this becomes very evident when you start to look at what I call the tool or technology ecosystem out there for the sales world. What we're showing here is just a partial snapshot into that ecosystem with roughly 17 different categories of technology, and not all of the various companies who play in those areas of technology, but still, just to give you an understanding, there's a lot of technology out there that can be used by you to make your sales processes more effective, make your salespeople more effective, and increase your sales. Of course, when you look at this, most of us think of CRM or customer relationship management systems as probably the most commonly used piece of sales technology. And we could argue that that's right. The point we're trying to make here, though, is that even in the world of CRM, where most of us spend our sales technology dollars, there are at least 10 major companies in that space, at least the ones that we're showing here today. And in fact, you could probably double and in some cases triple the list of companies if you start to think of the companies that play from startup companies all the way to very large companies. But there are also other areas of technology in this ecosystem that we ought to be thinking about as we look at how we can increase the effectiveness of our sales teams. I won't read through all of these, but we can think of it all the way in the top left side of this chart with marketing automation into social media, call automation, configure pricing and quote type software, incentive compensation, territory alignment, etc., all the way over into some of the more horizontal offerings like the business intelligence, document collaboration, contract management, etc. So there's a lot of technology out there. There's been a very heavy emphasis in the venture capital markets in terms of investing in startup companies in this space. So you see a lot of churn with these vendors. Sure, you have the large vendors like the Salesforce.com, the SAPs, Microsoft, Oracles of the world, who play in multiple categories and who, unless, barring something really disastrous, are probably going to be in this space for a long time. But in some of the other areas, for instance, if we think about social media, I remember a time when Plaxo was sort of the de facto way in which you shared information, contact information. But it has by far been consumed by the LinkedIn marketplace, and we see Google Plus, Facebook, etc., Twitter, and so forth. So a lot of different technologies out there, and when you've got this many choices, sometimes that can be a good thing, and sometimes that can be a very challenging thing. So what we really want to focus on with respect to that large ecosystem of different products, tools, technologies out there is, what are the common pitfalls that we see people making that we work with, or that have made these mistakes before we work with them, or just through our analysis and study of the market, what are the common pitfalls we see people making? Well, these are, and I'll try to take a little bit of a humorous approach on this. The first pitfall, unfortunately, is pretty easy, and it's unrealistic expectations. Much like the guy who's sitting on his couch at the top of the screen here, who's, I'm not going to venture to say exactly how overweight he is, but let's just say he's not fit. And he sees a commercial on TV that says that in a scant 28 days, he can be this buff, ripped guy on the right side of the screen. We all know that's not true. We know there's no way in the world that's going to happen. But it's amazing how many of these get fit quick or get slim quick type programs actually sell in the marketplace. And there's got to be a reason for that. There's some sort of a dream that these people are selling in the consumer market, and we see the same thing in the business market. Now, on the bottom side of the screen, and this is, not that I'm some buff guy like on the top right, but this one's probably a little bit more appropriate to me. I can't tell you how many times, and I'd like to think of myself as a rational human being, I've been nearly sucked into purchasing some sort of amazing product that's going to all of a sudden restore all the hair of my youth on the top of my head. And it just doesn't seem to work. I've talked to a lot of people. It just doesn't work. I don't do it. Now, the thing that you see with these unrealistic expectation situations is it's not just the dream where people have the unrealistic expectation. It's typically also the cost and the time frame and the level of effort to get there. So the top side of the screen where people are trying to get fit, we see far too often that people think that in a very short period of time and with almost no effort, they can get to their dream state. And it's just not the case. The same thing is true with the technology that we work with. So the key things that we recommend people do in this space to counteract this is, first of all, do your homework. Don't just listen to what you heard at the club when you're working out with your fellow CEOs or VPs of sales. Talk to case studies. Actually talk to people who are using the technology and make sure that they're getting the expected benefits, that they can share with you how long it took to get that technology up and running and so forth. Third thing is, look, if it sounds too good to be true, chances are it probably is. And whether it's a hair care product or a CRM, it's not going to solve all your ills. So a rule of thumb that we've used, and this may be a little bit harsh, but as we're going through and looking at technology and its expected benefit for an organization, we think in terms of cutting the expected benefits in half and doubling the expected cost. Cost in terms of dollars, but also cost in terms of time. And if this still looks like a good investment at this point in time, then it's probably something you should move forward with. The second pitfall is very much closely related to that in the sense that people make uninformed and hasty decisions. I can't tell you how many times my wife has asked me to stop on the way home from work and pick up something from the grocery store. And I'm every bit as clueless as this poor guy you're looking at right now on the screen. I don't know an olive oil from a salad dressing, and despite what my wife thinks are very explicit instructions she's given me as to what I'm supposed to purchase, by the time I get to the grocery store, that's out of my head, and I'm flooded with different options, and all of a sudden I end up making an uninformed decision because I've got to get home with that ingredient so that dinner can be cooked on time. Well, the way to solve this, and the same thing happens in the technology market all the time, we hear that we've got to be up on a new system by a period of time, and we go ahead and we make an uninformed, very hasty decision. Much like the first pitfall, doing your homework and talking to case studies are the two key things that you can do. And the third thing is you've got to make sure that you understand you don't have to buy the solution right now. Chances are your business will not go off the edge of the cliff if you don't have that particular technology in place today or tomorrow. The third pitfall, and this is the one that we're going to spend the majority of our time on today, is related to something that Bill Gates said. And I think that Bill Gates is a fantastic business person. I don't necessarily agree with all of the decisions that Microsoft has made over the years, but one thing that has been attributed to Bill Gates is a quote where he said, "The first rule of any technology in a business is that when you automate an efficient operation, it's going to magnify that efficiency." Makes sense. So we have something that's working really well, and we find a way to automate that through technology, then chances are we're going to magnify the benefit associated with that. Well, the second rule that he has is a corollary to that, which is that automation we apply to inefficient processes will magnify those inefficiencies. And I think this is really simple but really powerful. And unfortunately, this is what we see far too often when people do select technology, even if they pick the right technology for their sales processes. So the thing that we really want to figure out in today's session, because we don't have time to go through all 100 plus tools and technologies out there and tell you which are the ones that are good and which are the ones to stay away from, and trust me, there are plenty in both categories. What we want to do instead is focus on how we can help you determine what sales processes you need to focus on so that you can best enable them through tools and technology. Now, the key thing that we always start with, and we've developed an enterprise sales predictability maturity model where we have organizations going through 5 different levels. The first level is basically where most of your processes or all of your processes are really in kind of what I call a one-off mode. You're operating in a chaotic environment. Your processes are typically very ad hoc. We normally see this with smaller organizations, or believe it or not, we see this with larger organizations where decision making has been distributed out into the field, or if that organization has grown through a high level of acquisitions and the business processes of the acquired companies were not necessarily rolled into a common standard process. Level 2 are emerging organizations, and in this case we've got some standardization, but we're typically in key processes dependent on a few people. So think, for instance, of a software firm or an IT services firm where there are only a handful of people who can demo the product if you're the product company. Or say you're an IT services firm, and when it comes to providing the estimate to the client for what the project's going to look like, you've really only got a few people who can do that. It's great that you have standardized processes, but when you're dependent on just a couple or a few people for key activities, then you're opening yourselves up to danger. Now, levels 3, 4, and 5, we've got standardization and process. It's really a nuance with respect to whether or not we've gotten away from the fact that we are dependent on a few people. In level 3, we're not as dependent on the people, and we do have some baseline standardized processes, but they're not really automated. Levels 4 and 5, we've got levels of automation in place. Level 4, not only do we have some automation, but we're working on how we can improve. And level 5 is the top of our model, where not only do we have standardized and automated processes, but we've really streamlined things and we're focused on repeatability and excellence through that. So this is the first thing. We ask our clients, and we would expect you to do the same as you're looking to figure out how you can be more effective and get technology in the mix, and look for ways to, and rather assess where you are in each one of these different areas. The second thing is to look at the buying cycle of your client for the product or solution service that you sell. We talked about this a couple of webcasts ago, the fact that typically there are, at a minimum, two client buying cycles. One where the client is buying into the idea of doing something different than what they have today. And the second is where they're very seriously evaluating the options that will be a solution to whatever their business problem is. So before you start thinking about automating your processes, first and foremost, look at the maturity level of where you are, and then look at the buying cycle for your client. Closely follow that up with the third step, which is mapping your selling processes to the buying cycles. Now note, at this point, we're not saying anything about technology, right? You may be wondering, why we're talking about all this in a webcast that's focused on technology. And that's because the third and most common pitfall is that we find people going for a point solution or going for an all-in-one solution like a CRM and expecting it's going to solve everything without really having an opportunity to go and look at what are the core problems we're trying to solve to start with. So for instance, in mapping your selling processes, you may decide to break that into some marketing and lead generation processes, some direct sales processes, a management set of processes or leadership processes that go across everything that you do in your interaction with the client. And in doing that, on the marketing side, for instance, you may decide that we have these 5 core functions. We have brand awareness, content development, engagement tracking, so in other words, trying to figure out how engaged our clients are when they're working with us. We might have some information sharing cycles, and then contact development. Any one of those core areas can be aided by one or more classes of technology. So for instance, you might look at through your SEO processes that you need to do more in the social media space, and that might address your information sharing. It might also address how engaged people are because of how many followers you have. It might give you the ability to develop contacts, and it also gives you the ability to spread content, which ultimately is going to create brand awareness for you in this cycle. And the direct sales side, instead of focusing on CRM, what we ask our clients to do is to think a little bit deeper than just the technology and think in terms of we have to help our clients with problem discovery, some form of business case development, ultimately a product demonstration, or in the case of services, service line demonstration. Then we get into working the opportunity, sales forecasting, pricing, and quoting. Then on the management side, there are a whole series of capabilities. We've talked about forecasting and planning in previous webcasts. We've talked about territory planning and coverage models. We didn't talk as much about recruiting and onboarding, but certainly that's a key aspect to the management of your sales teams. And then coaching and incentive management. All of these are core areas that we see having technology but that can aid them. But the most important thing is really for you to look at where are we in terms of mapping to our client buying cycle, and do we understand all the various processes. This is going to drive the requirements you have for the software, and then ultimately gives you the ability to rate yourself against that maturity model we talked about. So we can take the different processes, in this case I've just taken a few of them, contact development through proposal and quote development, and we rate our current level against that maturity model. So we look at things such as, have we documented these processes? Are they measurable? Are they repeatable? Or are they dependent on the magic of one person, which also ties into the scalability aspect of it. And then finally, are they predictable? So there are other ways in which, other dimensions, if you will, that we would use to identify where we are in this current level. But then we can also look at this and say, okay, what's our 12-month goal? Where do we really think we can be? Do we really think we can take the coaching aspect of our business, for let's say, for instance, where today we're ad hoc. We only give coaching in this scenario in random scenarios. Well, is there something we can do from a technology point of view that will at least get us to the best few, which is level 3, so that we can start to really grow our team through the wisdom of our managers and leaders? The next thing we do is we recommend if new technology or if technology rather can help us with this. And so for each of these core areas, we would suggest you go through and you think about what are the types of things, both from a business process point of view, a people point of view, and then finally a technology point of view, that we can do to make our processes more effective. So for instance, in the territory planning space, where we're currently in the emerging category, and if we want to get to best view, you know what, we could go out and we could spend tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars on a territory planning tool, or we could just go into Excel and we could develop a territory model that would be more effective. Conversely, we might look at something like opportunity development, the actual tracking of our opportunities across the different cycle, and we might say that, you know what, CRM is the best area for us to work with that. Now, once we've done this, we have the opportunity to then go in and say, okay, what do we think is the estimated effort or cost for this, and what's our expected return? I'll tell you today that if you're a startup company looking for a CRM, your expected return is probably going to be pretty high and your cost is probably going to be pretty low, provided that you do it correctly. If you're a large company, your cost is probably going to be pretty high and your return is also going to be pretty high. So that's why in this particular model we're using relative factors of dollar signs as opposed to actual dollars. With you, of course, you're going to look at this from an actual dollars and cents point of view. And remember my advice from earlier, think in terms of your cost being about double what you think it's going to be in terms of the hard outlay of cash as well as time and people, and think about your return as being half of what you're being sold that it's going to be. Now, once you've done this, you have the ability to rank the different initiatives and make a final decision. In this particular example, after going through all the analysis, we've decided we are going to implement a CRM. We're going to enhance our coaching process through some technology. We're going to develop an enhanced playbook so that everybody understands what our processes are and how we operate, and then we're going to implement some standard KPIs. Not all of those 4 areas are completely dependent on technology, but certainly in terms of the CRM, the coaching, and the playbook, there's some technology along the way, and standards and standard KPIs can be implemented within there, but we can track those in some respects without the purchase of new software. So we found that if you take those 7 steps, it's going to put you in a much better position for selecting and implementing technology that will actually make your sales more effective. But before we start down this path, I want to give you a few cautionary notes on this whole process. And the first is build versus buy. Depending on the size of your company, you may or may not have access to information technology resources. And a lot of times we get into that habit of, you know what, we've looked at all the products and we think we can do something better. I would really caution you to think twice about that. There are so many different products on the market, and there's so many different good products on the market that are reasonably priced. Chances are there's a solution out there that you can buy. It may not have every bell and every whistle, or in this example, every room that you're looking for, but chances are it's going to meet the majority of your needs, and you've got an ecosystem of people out there who are using this and making this better, who have a common vested interest like you do to see this product get better over time. The second thing is, if you're deciding to purchase something, you need to make sure to really closely and carefully think about, are you going to work with the out-of-the-box features, or are you going to customize the solution? I've been using the same CRM pretty much since about 2002. I'm not going to tell you what that is. I don't want to bias you. But I've done this across a few different companies, and we've done this with dozens of our clients. And we'll tell you that in most cases, in my perspective, with my sales teams and with my clients, we've been able to work with the out-of-the-box capabilities of that CRM. We have not heavily customized it. Now, if you have very, very specific business needs, of course you're going to need to customize that solution. But just keep in mind that when you customize, the price of the implementation goes up, and it also affects your price not just from the implementation, but also in terms of the upgrade, because chances are those customizations will not translate into the new version of the software. The final thing is training. Far too often we see clients who have implemented a CRM, an email automation system, a calling system, content development system, whatever the case might be, and they do it without training. Or they do it with a very limited set of training. You know, that's like going out and buying a car and giving it to your children and not giving them lessons on how to drive the car. Chances are they're going to have a few wrecks before they get that car down the road without having a wreck. It's important for you to train your people. Salespeople's time is the most important thing they have. And if they don't understand why they're using the solution, if they don't understand how to use it, and if they don't understand the benefit to them, they're going to stop using it, which means you've just spent all that money and you've gotten none of the return you're really looking for. So that's our session for today. Again, my name is Scott Williamson. I'm with Revenade. I would very much like to solicit input from anybody who's on the line today. I know it's a short session and we don't have time for online questions, but please feel free to reach out to me either at scott.williamson@Revenade or my cell phone, which is listed here, or you can reach out to us via our website and put a contact submission request in there. We do a lot of work in this area. We've seen a lot of things go well. We've seen a lot of things, unfortunately, not go so well, and we'd love to be able to share with you in more of a one-on-one setting how this type of process and how these technologies can be useful to you. Thank you very much.